October 16th was the beginning of the world's closest encounter with nuclear warfare. 13 days of suspense. During a routine flyover of Cuba with the U-2 intelligence aircraft, thousands of photos were taken. Some of these photos shed light upon a new crisis at hand. It was the Cold War, a war unlike many others. During this war, no battles took place. It did include the space race, missiles, and many other threats between the United States and the Soviet Union. At this time, the Soviet Union had convinced Cuba that the US was going to invade them. Cuba believed this theory because of the Bay of Pigs invasion they experienced earlier. The Bay of Pigs invasion was a failed attempt by Cuban exiles trained by the United States to overthrow the government and take over. This provided the Soviet Union, also known as the USSR, the perfect chance to place missiles closer to the United States. These missiles were located only 90 miles from the coast of Florida. These nuclear missiles had the potential to wipe out entire cities and could ultimately devastate the US. It was feared that they were on the brink of an all-out nuclear war that would destroy countries like never before.
I really didn't. I can't tell you why I didn't. I just figure if something's going to happen, it's going to happen, so why should I worry about it?
Tuesday, October 17th, 1962. Photos were taken and sorted. Intelligence specialists reviewed them and ultimately determined that they were of importance. Later that day, the photos were presented to the President, John F. Kennedy, and to several of his security advisors. They discussed ways to react to the apparent missiles in Cuba. Several ideas were proposed during this meeting, one being an airstrike or an invasion, and the other was a naval quarantine with threat of further action. No plan of action was chosen during this meeting. Subsequent meetings occurred periodically throughout the next couple of days, as not to disturb the President's schedule and not to arouse any concern. Wednesday, October 18th, 1962. Following the information gathered on previous days, more work was done. Another U-2 flight spotted missiles, this time in the range of 16 to 32. To prepare for disaster, military units were transferred to the southern bases for faster response time in case it would be needed.
Well, my husband was in the Air Force. So during those days, no one was allowed leave. They had to be reporting to the base every day. So if you couldn't go, say we wanted to go to New Orleans or to Mobile, Alabama, we were not allowed to leave the Biloxi area.
Thursday, October 19th, 1962. President Kennedy is visited by the Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko, who informs the President that their presence in Cuba is strictly defensive and that should present no threat to the United States. During this whole meeting, President Kennedy never reveals to the USSR that the US is aware of their missiles in Cuba. Friday, October 20th, 1962, and Saturday, October 20th, 1962, President Kennedy and his advisors weighed their options and come out choosing the naval quarantine. A naval quarantine would block any military supply ships from entering Cuba and would result in halting the construction of these missiles, while non-military ships would be allowed to enter Cuba. The term quarantine was used instead of blockade because the US wanted to make sure that the other nations didn't see this as a warlike move. This was strictly affecting offensive ships only.
I think I did feel it was a good idea because I thought the Russians were getting too close to the United States and we would be better off if they were not so close to us.
Sunday, October 21st, 1962. The naval quarantine has been established. Freighters carrying non-military products are allowed through the quarantine while Soviet freighters are turning around and heading back. Monday, October 22nd, 1962. Kennedy spends the day addressing many government officials from all over the world on the crisis. He then wrote a letter to the premier of the Soviet Union stating that the USSR should know what damage a nuclear war would cause and the consequence that would face as a result of it. Within his letter to the Soviet Union, he's only pointing out to them the obvious and the dangers their actions hold. Later that night at 7 p.m., Kennedy went on live television to address the nation of the crisis. During his televised announcement, he reveals the naval quarantine surrounding the island of Cuba, which will remain in place until the removal of these missiles and the promise of no others. Tuesday, October 23, 1962. The naval quarantine is in action is clearly shown. The Soviet ships stopped dead in the water, waiting for further instruction, and Soviet submarines gathered in the Caribbean Sea, posing a threat toward the U.S. naval ships. Wednesday, October 24, 1962. The Soviet Union responds to the United States. In a letter sent to President Kennedy, saying that he is ultimately just using threats of force to get what he wants. This infuriates the Soviet Union, and they object to removing their missiles. Thursday, October 25th, 1962. There are many missiles pointed at the United States, and many are operational, but those that aren't would soon be. With the public's knowledge growing, so do their opinions. Many support an invasion of Cuba to destroy the missiles and teach them a lesson. This wasn't an option considered by the president. It was later learned that this theory was rejected as the result would have been an all-out war.
No, because I'm not in favor of the United States instigating a war anywhere.
Friday, October 26, 1962. The Soviet Union proposes a deal that they would remove their missiles from Cuba and not put up any more if, in exchange, the United States would lift their marine quarantine and ensure Cuba that an invasion would not occur. It was also learned later that in a letter from the Soviet Union to Cuba, it stated, if an invasion occurred, the missiles would be fired immediately at the United States. Saturday, October 27, 1962. The crisis finally is looking more and more like it will end peacefully and not result in war. The Soviet Union has had a second letter sent to Washington, changing the agreement though, throwing another twist into the mix. Although, with sending a new letter, they also shot a U.S. U-2 intelligence plane out of the air, killing the pilot. The new agreement required the United States to also remove the Jupiter missiles from Turkey, which posed a threat to the Soviet Union even though they were obsolete. Throughout the day, high-ranking government officials met to discuss the proposal at hand and what type of response to give the Soviet Union. By the end of the day, the decision was that the United States would deny the option of removing the Jupiter missiles from Turkey and would stick with the agreement proposed on Friday. Sunday, October 28, 1962. Day 13 of a 13-day crisis had finally come. The Soviet Union had accepted their deal to remove their missiles from Cuba as long as the U.S. promised not to invade Cuba and to lift the naval quarantine. Both sides fulfilled their parts of the deal, and what could have been one of the deadliest situations in history ended in peace. It wasn't for another 30 years or so that the public and historians learned of the real deal made that Saturday night. After files were declassified and leaks were confirmed, the public learned that the United States had actually agreed to the second deal proposed by the Soviet Union. Along with their non-invasion agreement and removal of naval quarantine, the U.S. had to move their Jupiter missiles from Turkey. This part of the deal was kept private and rumored to have been transmitted through the president's brother, Robert Kennedy, who at the time was the Attorney General. The United States government didn't want any outsiders knowing of this part of the deal. It has been speculated that the agreement was kept secret because the public would oppose such a deal and tarnish support for Kennedy. That the government wanted the public to believe that they had used a threat of force to make the Soviet Union remove their missiles. Believing this would only improve the United States' power and pride. In the end, the war was successfully averted.
No, because I feel there are things that the government does that are better off done without everyone knowing about them.
These 13 days in October are probably the most difficult days a president has ever gone through. Any wrong move in the whole country could have been in a nuclear war. The world's closest encounter with nuclear war had ended, and luckily for President John F. Kennedy, the crisis ended in peace and he could walk away successful.
I think it's mostly just a time in history.